Some journeys in life are chosen, others are forced upon us, and sometimes the path we never planned leads to the greatest blessings. This is the story of Ruth, a young widow who left everything behind to follow an uncertain future, a story of love, sacrifice, and a destiny she never saw coming. A long time ago in Accra, Ghana, a woman named Naomi Ayisi lived happily with her husband, Elimelech Ayisi, and their 2 sons. They were a good family, hard-working and God-fearing. But then disaster struck. A great famine swept across Ghana, just like the terrible famine of 1983. Food was scarce, hunger spread, life became unbearable. There was no food, no jobs, no hope. Elimelech looked at his wife and children. He couldn't let them starve, so he made a bold and tough decision.
Naomi, we are leaving. We will go to Nigeria. I hear there is food there. Maybe we can start over there.
So Naomi and her family left Ghana, crossing the border into Nigeria in search of a better life. They left home, family, and friends, all for survival. In Nigeria, things were better. Elimelech found work, and their family adjusted. At first, things looked promising. They settled in Lagos, Nigeria, and their 2 sons married Nigerian women, one named Orpah Okafor and the other Ruth Adeyemi. For a while, everything seemed fine. But then, tragedy struck again. Elimelech died, and before Naomi could recover from that heartbreak, both her sons died too. Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth were now 3 widows, alone in a foreign land. Naomi was devastated.
Why, God, why have you allowed this?
She cried. In her pain, she decided.
I have nothing left here. I'm going back to Ghana.
And that's when Ruth had to make the most important decision of her life. Naomi called Orpah and Ruth and said,
My daughters, you have been good to me, but I have nothing to offer you. I have no more sons for you to marry. Go back to your families. Start a new life in Nigeria.
Orpah cried. She didn't want to leave, but in the end, she kissed Naomi goodbye and returned home. But Ruth held on tightly to Naomi.
I won't leave you,
she said. Naomi shook her head.
Ruth, my daughter, I have nothing to give you. No husband, no riches, nothing.
But Ruth looked at her and said,
Don't ask me to leave you. Wherever you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God.
Ruth was still young. She could have gone back to her old life. She could have married again and enjoyed herself. But Ruth denied herself. She left everything behind to follow Naomi, just like how a person leaves their old life behind to follow Jesus. So together they traveled back to Ghana, to a place called Dodowa, Accra. Life was not easy in Ghana. Naomi was old and they had no money. So Ruth went out to work. She found a farm owned by a rich and kind man named Boaz Ayisi, and every day she picked leftover grains from his field. She worked from morning till evening under the hot sun without complaining. Some young women would have let hardship change them. They would have given up or done wrong things for survival. But Ruth was different. She didn't chase rich men. She didn't have multiple boyfriends. She didn't steal or lie. She remained virtuous, hardworking, and humble, and God was watching. One day, Boaz saw Ruth working in his field.
Who is that young woman?
He asked his workers. They replied, That is Ruth, the young woman from Nigeria who came with Naomi. She has been working hard since morning. Boaz was impressed. He called Ruth and said,
I have heard of your kindness to Naomi. Stay in my field. I will protect you. I will make sure you have enough food to eat.
Ruth bowed her head.
Why are you so kind to me, a foreigner?
Boaz smiled.
Because you have chosen to follow the Lord. May God reward you for your faithfulness.
Ruth continued working hard, and Boaz kept an eye on her. Now Naomi knew Boaz was a relative of her late husband, and in their culture, the closest male relative had the right to marry a widow and take care of her. So Naomi gave Ruth some advice.
Tonight, Boaz will be at the threshing floor. Go Go there, uncover his feet and lie down. He will know what to do."
Ruth obeyed. That night when Boaz saw her at his feet, he was surprised.
"Ruth, what are you doing here?"
She answered,
You are a family redeemer. Please take me under your protection.
Boaz was pleased.
"You are a good woman, Ruth. You could have chased after younger men, but you didn't. I will marry you. But first, I must speak to the closest kinsman. If he doesn't want to marry you, then I will."
The next day, Boaz went to meet the closest kinsman.
"You have the right to marry Ruth and take her late husband's land."
Boaz said. The man shook his head.
"I don't want to. You can take her."
So before the elders of the town, Boaz officially took Ruth as his wife, and soon a grand Ghanaian wedding was held in Dodowa, Accra. There was kente, there was dancing, there was joy in the air. Women sang songs of praise, and men clapped their hands. Naomi, who once thought God had forgotten her, could not stop smiling. She looked at Ruth and said,
"You have been better to me than 7 sons."
God had rewarded Ruth's humility, self-denial, and hard work. She was no longer a poor widow. She had a loving husband, a home, and a bright future. Ruth was not from Israel, the chosen people of God. She was a foreigner. But because she chose to follow Naomi and the God of Israel, she became part of something greater than she could have imagined. Her great-grandson was King David, and from her descendants came Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world. Her story teaches us that self-denial, humility, and faithfulness bring great rewards. Even when life is tough, even when we have nothing, if we choose to follow Jesus, remain virtuous, and work hard, He will bless us beyond what we can imagine, just like He did for Ruth. Lessons from Ruth-a's story. 1. Hardship does not define you, but your choices do. Ruth lost her husband, but she didn't lose her character. 2. God rewards faithfulness. She followed Naomi, trusted God, and was rewarded. 3. God can turn pain into purpose. Naomi thought her life was over, but God was still writing her story. 4. Your past doesn't stop God from using you. Ruth was not an Israelite, but she became part of God's plan. What if Ruth had chosen comfort over Christ? What if she had gone back like Orpah? What if she had given up? Maybe your life feels like Naomi's right now. Maybe you feel like God has forgotten you. But hear this, God is not done with you. Your best days are still ahead. Hold on, keep trusting, because just like Ruth, your story is not over yet.